Assertiveness. It's one of those things that all of us may struggle with at times. We might get so frustrated and stressed out to the point where we blow up at someone. Or maybe we do the opposite and become passive, holding things in to the point where we freeze up and feel worse for it after the fact. Some may even just choose not to do anything, and then wait until the problem is past before they become passively aggressive and complain about things where the problem isn't around to face. When I watched Putting Your Hoof Down, it resonated with me a bit. I'm not really the most outgoing person, and I usually let it dictate how I was doing things in the long run. In the past, I became analytical and distant, trying to solve my problems by looking at them from afar first, to the point where I was afraid of dealing with things directly. And when I was caught off guard, I ended up becoming more rigid, defensive, and black and white in how I dealt with things, often falling back on skills that I usually wouldn't use unless I felt cornered. This lasted for me for a while, at least until I hit college and started looking at how psychology works and broadened my social horizons with other people. So in all honesty, when I watched this episode, it sort of just didn't set well with me. Not because it was bad, but because it sort of struck a chord. I've watched and rewatched this episode a few times since then, and each time I watch it, while I still get a laugh out of some of the behaviors, I still also have to cringe about some of the things that the writers did. So without further ado, let's take a look at Putting Your Hoof Down. In this episode, we get to see Fluttershy living to her namesake, being shy and hovering around in the background. This was still back in Season 2, before she had established herself as being more assertive and still being a kind and gentle character. This episode in itself was the turning point. It wasn't the only example of her learning how to put her hoof down, but it was the first one. No, here in this episode, we get to see her experiment with the extremes of aggressive behavior. And it isn't just her that we get to see it come from. We get to see it from the background ponies and one unlikable bunny. I really do not like Angel Bunny in this one. So many have already looked at this episode and called him a spoiled brat, and I have to flat out agree with them. The writers just put him in as pure aggressive. But this isn't the episode's only flaw. Almost every background pony is flat out rude, obnoxious, and overbearing. Not all of them, but enough where I have to wonder if the writers just wanted to see how much abuse Fluttershy could take. In this episode alone, we get to see her smacked by Angel Bunny, shoved around by the townsfolk, and people treating her like a doormat. Now don't get me wrong, I know that conflict has to be there in order for something to overcome it. But for Celestia's sake, I saw less aggression in Griffinstone. At least there, they were aloof. Here, the ponies just go out of their way to rub Fluttershy's face in the dirt. Perhaps one can argue that this is a setup to be more of a foil to make people less uncomfortable when Fluttershy retaliates against them. But overall, it just paints the background ponies as jerks. Moving on, Fluttershy's interactions with Iron Will were well-intentioned. She went to his seminar looking to solve her problems. But the problem we have is one of the leading flaws of this episode. Iron Will confuses aggression with assertive behavior. If this is meant to teach children a lesson, it's giving them the wrong idea unless you choose to correct it. And while we see their behaviors change throughout the episode, nobody calls out this mistake. Iron Will tells Fluttershy that she needs to be more assertive and then shoves somebody over. This is physically acting upon your anger. This is aggression. Shouting, yelling, all the catchphrases, as funny as they might be, are still aggressive. Now, Fluttershy does eventually learn this mistake, and she decides to call out her behavior as being monstrous. But it doesn't change the fact that you didn't tell people what being assertive is actually about. Being assertive can be individual to the way that a person acts. The episode does give a good example of this through Pinkie Pie and Rarity's behaviors. Pinkie Pie demonstrates this in an albeit confusing but accurate Looney Tunes tactic, and Rarity uses her charm to help her get her way in the long run. Some people may argue that this is manipulative, but the term manipulative just means that you're capable of manipulating your environment. To them, this is creative problem solving. The show also does a good example of showing how this won't work in every situation. Iron Will is able to shrug them both off. So, a more direct method of being assertive is usually what you want to practice. And in Fluttershy's case, the no means no argument is especially effective. And personally, I wouldn't even argue that Iron Will is a bad creature so much as misinformed. He's trying to teach people how to do things for betterment, even if it is for a profit. And he still respected Fluttershy's boundaries to a degree. I mean, you see that he knocks on the door, and he's willing to come back a bit later if she wasn't there. He simply was trying to just conduct his business. A crappy, misinformed, and misleading business, but still a business. So can I stay angry at this episode? No. But I'm still upset for it misrepresenting the idea of being assertive. This episode also still has some of those cringeworthy moments that you kind of want to look away from. Fluttershy insulting both Pinkie Pie and Rarity, the way she treats the mailman. I mean, seriously, right into the mailbox. There's just a lot of unpent hostility in this episode, which makes it one of my least favorites. What do you guys think? Please leave your messages in the comments below, and feel free to subscribe. And as always, thanks for staying a while to listen.